determined after, oops, I'm hearing some feedback.
Recording.
Is anybody else hearing that? Okay.
It came from recording.
Oh, I'm muted. Did you guys hear that? Or was I just talking?
Yes, it was just the recording starting.
Oh.
Nicholas was starting. Yeah.
But then I muted myself. So, okay, let's start again. Okay, so today's meeting is to do the second interviews for the top 2 candidates for the executive director position. These 2 candidates were determined after the hiring subcommittee had interviewed them for the first set, and they were the highest scorers. After we finish this set of interviews, we will be taking a final vote on the top candidate today. We had many great applicants. It was really quite a pleasure to see the CVs. So we have full confidence that either one of these candidates would be an excellent executive director. I wanted to just take a moment and thank Nicholas for his extremely hard work behind the scenes, and the hiring committee, who also did a lot of work, and that is Ruth, Bobby, and Lois. So thanks everybody for extra work and extra time they put in. Because we want to keep everything focused on equity, we are going to start this day with a presentation on the implicit bias during hiring from the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. And I see our presenter is here. But before we go, just another quick note. This is this part of the meeting will be public. However, when we go into the interview and deliberation process, that is going to be, because of privacy issues, moved to executive section. So if there's any members of the public present right now, you will be put into, on Zoom, you'll be put into a waiting room. And Nicholas, I don't think we have anybody in your building, so, right? So nobody's going to have to be asked to leave. Okay. And then we'll come back in public for the final vote. Okay. Anybody have questions about how that is going to happen? Okay. All right. So now I'm going to have Nicholas do our roll call.
Perfect. Thank you, Diane. So if you hear your name, just say yes, and I'll mark you down. Katie Byron.
Present.
Senator Judy Warnick.
I'm here. I just couldn't get it off mute. Sorry.
No problem. Justice Bobby Bridge.
Present.
Representative Tom Dent. I believe we were told he'll be joining us shortly. Senator Claire Wilson.
Present.
Ben DeHaan. Sydney Forrester. Ruth Kagi.
Present.
Dr. Diane Levy.
I'm here.
Danielle Johnson. Lois Martin.
Present.
Representative Tana Sen.
Here.
All right, and with that, we do have quorum for this meeting.
Thank you all for coming on such an important occasion. Keisha, did I say your name correctly? You might have to tell us how it's pronounced, but I would like to turn the floor over to you for your implicit bias in hiring training, and go ahead and give us a little bit of information about yourself and your position, maybe to start. Thanks.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I'm Keisha Porcincula. I am the Racial Equity and Social Justice Administrator with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice for the Department of Children, Youth, and Family Services. And my background is all over the place. I've worked with several of you for many years. I've been in policy advocacy, went into a social justice administrator role with DCYF not too long ago, and have worked throughout nonprofits for a good decade now. So racial equity and social justice work is truly my passion. and just getting a broader understanding and awareness around just how we can do better, be better, is always a good thing. So with this, actually, our interim director, Alice Coyle, was going to be joining us and presenting this. And unfortunately, she is very ill. So handed it over to me, and I don't want to take credit for anything that I didn't create solely myself. So Alice really did craft this presentation, and it's not really, we're not going to think of this as a training today. We are really going to just think of this as a broadening of our understanding and our awareness around biases. I am going to try my best. They have us all on Teams now, so I'm much more familiar with Teams than I am with Zoom nowadays. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I share? I think actually, Nicholas, you might have to give me permission. There we go. Thank you. Okay, can you all see this screen?
Yes.
Great. So again, I want us to just really have a little bit of interaction. I am sure we have all heard about biases and have an understanding of what those are. Of course, we know what interviewing is. So today we're doing a little bit of a play on that. So interview biases to avoid. And this is for you all on today's date. Everyone carries biases. So we talked about that just briefly, but we literally have so many biases. Some we don't even truly recognize until someone says, "Huh, I think you're being a little bit biased there." It's really easy to do. And again, not all biases should be thought of through a negative connotation or are necessarily wrong. Some biases we carry do promote a sense of safety for all of us. And so I don't want this to come across as just extremely negative. So again, we're going to focus on ones that we should avoid during interview processes. So an interview bias happens when we judge a candidate's ability based on stereotypes or preconceived ideas about a person. It really just is how familiar you are with someone or how they show up is what we're going to be using the context here. So we just want to give that landing ground for when we are talking about biases today. It is for interviewing, and this is the definition that we're going to build from. So there's about 9 of them that we found that we can call out that tend to happen in an interview base. So interview bias awareness, we are going to talk about all 9 of these here. I'm not going to read the list to you all because we're going to move through those. The first would be stereotyping. So judging a candidate based on group characteristics instead of their individual qualities. So here's where I'm going to see if you all can help me through some of these examples. Most of our slides are going to have some examples. There really isn't any right or wrong answer. It's just what first comes to mind. So an example is you reject a candidate because their something background makes you question their intelligence, even though they have years of experience. Does anyone want to fill in the blank for us? Give us an example that you think happens most often in stereotyping.
This is Bobby Bridge. I think it's educational background, or lack thereof in more particular. If someone hasn't been to college, you think they're not smart, even though they have years of experience, and that's not necessarily true, that they aren't smart.
Absolutely. So that's just a broad sweep of folks. So our primary example to use with education in an interview context is not everyone is going to, the first thing they do, state their educational background, right? They're going to give you a little bit more about themselves. They're not in their intro in an interview. They may not say where they went to school or what kind of level of achievement that they accomplished there. And sometimes if they don't do that, you just automatically assume that they don't have one, which also furthers into stereotyping that someone that didn't have a formal education or academic credentials is less intelligent than someone that maybe has the full alphabet behind their name. When there is lived experience and so on and so forth that we should be putting forward into that. So great, thank you for that example. The next is a halo or horn bias. And this one may not be as familiar in the title to most folks, but let's look at that definition. So when a single characteristic or physical trait overshadows an applicant's other qualities, when that trait is positive and you hire them for that reason, this bias becomes the halo effect. If it's negative and you reject them, it becomes the horn effect. And so here I don't have an example, but I wanted to see if we can pull out some examples between the two pictures as to what a halo and a horn effect may be, or something that we may automatically, one, stereotype, and two, add into our halo horn from these two individuals' pictures. These are candidates, they're sitting in front of us.
Well, looking at the difference in their clothing, I can see how you could potentially put a halo on the gentleman on the left, because the gentleman on the right is in more casual clothing. And so you could be like, oh, the guy on the left cares more about this interview, cares more about this job.
Right. Thank you for that. That is a prime example right there. We used to use the term groomed, right? Or professional hygiene or professional appearance. When actuality, what if there was not really a dress code presented? It wasn't a job that necessarily applies for having a very business 9 to 5 appearance with a suit and a tie. Many of our jobs these days, we really don't require that formality of dress. And some of our most essential workers and folks that we interact with and gain the most positive experiences with employment don't necessarily show up in a suit and a tie every day, right? I know I don't wear a power suit every day, even though sometimes it helps, but I don't. And so that's a perfect example. Dress, attire, hair. We all know that sometimes hairstyles can get in the way and cause bias, and that's kind of what's depicted here. Next is our recency bias. So this one was really interesting to try to develop even a definition around it, because you can truly have so many definitions for how this bias shows up. So the one we went for here is, chances are you better remember people you interviewed more recently. So their positive or negative traits are fresher in your brain. We all know that, folks are always interviewing for jobs that they feel really passionate about, or they are just looking for that promotion or that next opportunity in their career. So if we recently interviewed them for something else and, they didn't do so great, and maybe that was not necessarily their fault. Maybe that was, they weren't truly passionate about that role. But just because we recently had that interaction with them, it carries over. And we may not even be trying to have that, right? To have that bias. We're like, no, fresh start. They're applying and we're interviewing them for this role, but it's still there. So during the interview, a candidate doesn't give a good answer to your last question. That final error sticks with you and you choose a different candidate, even though they aren't as strong overall. And so again, it's that combination of, they didn't do that great on that other interview, then they missed this one again, even though they may actually be more qualified or a better fit for the current role that you're interviewing them for, that interaction that you had with them previously does tend to show up. And this picture was just really cute. We're just like, huh? Like, you know, when people give that response and you're like, no, or a positive way, right? It's like, I know you can do so much better. And they just don't give you the answer you're looking for in that particular interview. So first impression bias, how many of us think about that, right? We have all heard that saying is your first impression is your lasting impression. And we think back to, I can think back to 20 years ago or so when I first met someone and my first impression of them, and if it's changed or if it's, you know, stayed the same or what that is. But first impression in an interview basis is forming an opinion based on your first impression can remain throughout the interview process, even if that impression has nothing to do with their merit. So an example is you unconsciously favor a mediocre candidate who attended the interview in a neutral color, or in your mind, a more professional looking outfit instead of the more competent applicant who wore colorful attire. So that again goes back to dress. I know one that often happens is if a candidate comes in and they mispronounce their folks' names on the interview panel, or don't fully address everyone in their official context of name and honor, right? That throws people off, and it makes you think that there's a different level of respect going on, or it just doesn't present the best foot forward, we like to say, in their interview. So that impression, even though it was a minor error or completely unintentional, it does stick with you throughout the interview. So sometimes you have to reduce that and say, you know what? Let's roll with it. That happened. Let's move along and let someone build more first impressions throughout their interview. Nonverbal bias shows up a lot. I will say I am somebody that speaks with my hands. That is just who I am. It's not to throw distraction or of any reason. It is just, I am an enthusiastic person. So it helps with my enthusiasm come across. But sometimes rejecting applicants based on physical mannerisms instead of skills is called nonverbal bias. If you have a candidate that's interviewing and they're twisting their hair around their finger when answering a difficult question, or they're avoiding eye contact, you disqualify that applicant because you judge them as uninterested in the position or unable to, right? If it's a difficult position and they're seeming as if they're having a hard time answering questions or they avoid eye contact, we don't think that it may be a sign of respect due to their culture and their background and their upbringing, that actually not looking folks directly in the eyes is more respectful than looking someone directly in the eyes. We take all of those for granted because we're so used to the way that we think and applying our bias around certain mannerisms that folks have. And so that is where that nonverbal shows up, when we're really just fully judging someone by things that are truly not intentional. So affinity bias. This is one of my favorites. So it's whether unconscious or not, people tend to favor others with similar interests as them. This tendency is known as similarity or affinity bias, meaning you have something in common with the candidate, you'll likely connect with them and favor them over other applicants. How often does this happen, right? We want to hire people that are like us, especially if they may work directly with us. We're like, oh yeah, you know, we share that commonality. I can see myself in them, or anything like that. I can see myself sharing lots of conversations with this person. And it really actually takes into more consideration in the interview process, or when you're looking at that applicant more favorably, in a way, then maybe their credentials actually should land them, right? You feel this sense of familiarity with them. So you may ask them to tell you about themselves. The candidate discloses that they completed the same internship as you. You bond over the experience, leading you to view their application more favorably than others. Sometimes it's you went to the same college or you know the same folks. And we really should base everyone as if we don't know them. Even though it's really, really hard, it may be your best friend that's applying to work with you. You have to give everyone that opportunity to get to know you, to show that they are someone worthy of a position, regardless of how familiar you are with them or feel with them. Central tendency. So when using a scale measurement, interview panelists tend to rate things closer to the middle. Even if that rating isn't accurate, this can make it harder to decide who to hire and discount an applicant's individual strengths and weaknesses. So how many of us do you all tend to use a rating scale, a 1 through 5 sliding scale on your, yep. I'm seeing lots of head nods. And so you're rating a series of candidates based on their work experience, and no one seems to stand out. So you mark them all average. When you do this, what then do we do to break those kind of average ties? We fall into even more biases, right? We tend to go to that great response that someone gave, or how someone showed up, or, oh, do you remember that moment where they made us laugh, or something like that is the tendency that we went to. So honestly, what we're seeing here is that a measurement scale isn't always the best in interviews in which we are truly trying to find a candidate that needs to fill a role that is more than what we would say like line work or work that could be achievable through a series of tasks. So what we, I guess, would encourage is just really making sure that there are moments for notes, that you're pulling out all of those qualities and strengths as you are making that rating. So if there is, everyone is landing in the middle, there's something that you can go back with that you wrote down in the moment versus just relying on that, oh, they scored a 3, a 5, a 1, in all of those areas. Make sure that you're making notes in coordination with your scale or your measurements. So inconsistency in questioning. This, I truly believe, interviewers are becoming much better at. I'm going to read this and then we're going to talk about this one a little bit. So instead of following a list of standardized questions during the interview, you decide to unnecessarily ask them about a gap in their resume or choose not to question their work experience. So the example is the candidate you're interviewing is a recent graduate of an Ivy League college. You don't ask about their understanding of an essential job requirement because you assume they know. But after hiring them, you learn they aren't as competent as you thought. So just because someone lists an amazing college doesn't necessarily mean that their comprehension during that time in their college career or their work experience lands them the positionality to be able to really fulfill their job requirements. Also, other inconsistencies in questioning show up in follow-up responses or follow-up questions that happen from the interviewers. I know that it's usually discouraged that in the interview format that any interviewer provides or asks a follow-up question. So if a candidate gives you a question and you want more for some reason and you ask them to please follow up on that, it needs to be something that can be clearly asked and stated of the next candidate, because you're providing a particular candidate more of an opportunity to expand on a question than you may a different candidate. So really, you should just stay with the candidate's response. If they happen to not answer, say one of the questions is a list of answers you're seeking, a 1 through 3 type scenario, and they happen to miss question 2 of your question, you can say, can you just share and then state the question so that it is just clear that each candidate can check that category and make sure that they all answer the question concisely. Does everyone understand that? That one is kind of interesting because, again, it's something that we have a tendency to do in interviewing, is follow up or the conversation aspect. Yeah.
So I have a question about this because that is something that's actually relevant to our ongoing interviewing, which is, so therefore, is it acceptable if you've looked at somebody's resume, for example, and you notice that they tend to move around jobs a little bit more than the other candidate, would it be acceptable to ask about that to the one candidate? Or are you saying that we shouldn't because we're not asking the same question to both?
Right. So there should be a consistency in that question. I believe that there would be a way to ask both candidates kind of the same question. You could ask about the longevity in their roles, and that could be something that, again, would be asked of both candidates. So if one is, been somewhere for 18 years, tell us about the longevity that you have had at your previous employer. Then with the person that's kind of moved around and we're not clear as to why that may have been, say, tell us about the longevity at your previous employments. And again, the candidate, that offers a consistency on our end, but it offers the candidates an availability to answer and however they would like to address that. Does that help a little bit, a little clarity?
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah. So confirmation bias. This one is just a looping of everything we kind of talked about. So confirmation bias operates hand in hand with other biases on this list. When you judge an interviewee based on your preconceptions, it can lead you to ask questions or pay attention to information that validates the things you already think. Example, during an interview, you ask your top candidate questions, highlighting their strengths while ignoring any red flags and weaknesses. So again, that would be just going back and saying, that you have a familiarity with a candidate over someone else. So you're focusing really on, I want this candidate because they're most like me. And so you're confirming through questioning that want and that desire. Another is trying to find potentially those pitfalls in someone by asking them an unfair advantage of, oh, well, we see you've moved around a lot. Is that because, and that assumption of why they've moved around versus they may have moved around because their last organization lost grant money. That has no control over the candidate themselves, but that is just what happened in their life circumstance. And so again, this is just checking all of those biases so that you're not swaying anything that you've learned about your candidate into one direction or another. You're just gently basing all of this upon the information that was presented in front of you from the candidate themselves and, of course, their resume. So this is our question that we really like to address and we talk about often in the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. It is this fit, right? It is as if we are really trying to make sure that folks fit into something. And it always leaves me with saying, fit into what? Like what are we actually trying to fit folks into? And is that accurate? So are we looking for someone who will fit in or add to existing work culture? if we know we are always trying to grow and elevate and really improve our work culture, is a fit in really what we should be doing? So that's looking for someone based upon their similarities to the group, or that they would pretty much fit the status quo, or you don't think that they would push the status quo too much. That is kind of our fit in person. Whereas you're wanting to add to, right? We always want to elevate. We always want to look for someone who brings a diverse set of ideas or experiences to the group, and who is innovative, who allows for that momentary pause where they're thinking kind of outside of the box, outside of this status quo that we've been falling into, and has just a much different, broader perspective than we may have ourselves, or as a qualitative department, group, agency, organization, right? So we should be looking for folks that add, and not necessarily fit. When it does come to well, I want to make sure that they'll get along, with our team members, or they'll get along. It's more of the why, the what is that in there that you are trying to make sure of. And that will then trickle a different conversation than today, but kind of our culture, right? What is our work culture? Why are we questioning that this potentially dynamic person may not fit in or get along with the culture that we have, that is developed? So that's it for you all. I talked really fast. I can click back and go through any slides. We can, have some more questions here. I'm going to stop sharing for right now, if that's okay with you all. Can I get a yes, a thumbs up? If I can stop sharing, and we can have a little bit of dialogue. So what are all of your thoughts? I'm sure, again, a lot of that wasn't new information. We all know, again, that we have biases. It's just they show up, and now we have these names for them, right? In different ways. Yes, I see a hand. I'm not sure who it is. If you have your
Go
hand
ahead,
raised, please.
Lois.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it is. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize my name's not there. I'll add it in.
Oh, no. I'm sure it is. My screen is just you're not actually there.
Oh, no problem. So I wanted to go back to the follow-up questions just to make sure. So we have a question and a board member has a follow-up question. Should we take note of that follow-up question and ensure that we share it with the next person? Or do we just move on once that person who asked that follow-up question is satisfied? How do we keep that parity going?
So the recommendation truly is to not have follow-up questions unless it is that the initial question was not fully responded to. And if the initial question was not fully responded to just simply restate the portion of the question as your follow-up that wasn't answered. A follow-up question, if you have it in your mind, what we suggest you do is simply take note, write it down in your own notes. And then when you're doing your debrief, talk about it with your fellow colleagues, your fellow interviewers, to see if perhaps someone caught something that you did not. And then if you have a lot of follow-up questions, that may serve as a second interview or as an additional opportunity for everyone, though, to be able to answer some of these follow-up questions. But that really truly is the recommended way of doing it. If an interviewer has just gone and asked that follow-up question, then yes, make note of it and try to translate it in a way that can be asked to the other candidates, whether it's an additional question or whether it's added into the initial question.
So I think if we had, say, somebody's giving us an example and we're a little foggy on what they're saying, is it appropriate that we can say, could you please say more about X? That would be the same kind of question. So we wouldn't be
Right.
asking a different answer. We're just asking for clarity. That would
Exactly.
be different than what you're talking about, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. A follow-up, I'm
Ruth.
just gonna pull an example. A follow-up could potentially, that wouldn't be appropriate is, oh, you mentioned you worked with Bob at such and such. Can you tell us more about that? No, that's not conducive with what you're trying to gain.
Thank you.
Yes.
How about you, Ruth?
It just raises a really big dilemma in terms of if you have a follow-up question for the second interview, you can't go back and ask that question to the first candidate. So it's
Right. So what I have seen though in follow-up questions being in second interviews is you can send if that person is your top candidate, you can definitely have some communication with them after it via email or a phone call to address those. But they have to, it's usually the really closed, I would say, follow-up series of questions is for your first round of interviews. Second round, and you have those questions and it's a top candidate, I would say you could be a little bit looser because you have really tailored down that list of candidates to some higher level folks there and your candidacy. But a conversation even after is fine.
That's very helpful because one of the things that we were planning to do is open it up to the whole board for some follow-up questions after we get through our standardized questions. But I think from what you say, we won't do that in this case. Okay. Thank
Right.
you.
But unless you're at that moment where it's really going to sway you all, it's a second interview, or you're trying to decipher who your top candidates are. But I would always make that list of top candidates, really figure out what it is that you're trying to decipher with these follow-up questions. What is it really that we're trying to get to? And make sure that that isn't, again, skewed on bias, skewed on, confirming some thoughts that weren't necessarily presented in the candidate's material or responses. I think putting your heads together is always fine. That's why we do interview debriefs. But if it's in the moment of an interview, that's when follow-up is a little bit, especially, I will say also, especially if you presented the interview questions in advance to the candidate, that may not be their best learning and process. And so it really can throw a candidate off for the rest of the entire interview unintentionally.
Okay, Bobby.
I just am wondering, I'm kind of beating this dead horse, but it's not dead yet, I don't think, because these are our two top candidates. Only 4 of us did the initial interviews because we were delegated that responsibility. This wasn't a coup. And so now we are here, and there are now another 4 or 5 people, I'm not sure how many more, for whom this will be the first interview for these candidates. So we have a little mixed bag here. Recognizing that we've got a potential for an implicit bias problem. If we had a burning question or a follow-up that we were unable to cure, that is to say, it came, as I think Ruth mentioned, if it came to the second candidate, and so therefore we don't have we can't change up and ask that question today. Would follow-ups in writing and to ask the candidates each to respond to a question following these interviews and in writing, would that mitigate the potential for harm?
I think so. I think you guys are getting it exactly, that it just needs to be presented to all of the candidates. It cannot just be to one of them.
Okay.
So if you have follow-ups, make sure that you can tailor that follow-up question so that it can be answered by whomever.
In the moment, right, yeah.
Right. You can do it in the moment. I really do prefer that it is in a written format. So that again, it gives that processing time for the candidates so they can show up in their best form. But not that always, that's not always possible. So just again, make sure that it's a fair availability access point to that follow-up question.
And our interviewees will have the questions in front of them while they're being interviewed. So, in case there's a 1, 2, 3 part, which I think we avoided, but if there were, a complex sentence or something, that they could refer it back. So that's hopefully help too.
I see hands. I just want to reiterate one thing that I did here is what I would do, because what I heard is that there's about 4 of you that were on the first interview, and now this is essentially the candidate's second interview.
The full board,
correct?
yeah.
Okay, so that's a fair sweep now. We're in second interview. You're in a panel type situation. Most folks that are interviewing know that their second interview is going to be very different than their first interview. A second interview is usually looked upon as a little bit more competitive. There is reasoning why you have expanded those that are interviewing. And so I would say that the suggestion that I would make is that for the 4 interviewers that attended the candidate's first interview, kind of I don't want to say take a step back, but could potentially allow those that have never interacted with the interviewees to be the ones to either present questions or do those portions of kind of, if there is this follow-up that we're questioning, be the ones that are really interviewing, as the other 4 kind of take a more back seat role. And you can say that in the second interview, say, you have met so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and now we're introducing you to the rest, and they are going to really be leading this portion of our interview process. Okay, hands.
Thank you.
Okay, Lois, I see you as my next hand.
Yeah, I think I'll wait until I know I saw Senator Warnick and Senator Wilson, and then I will comment after they finish.
Okay, thank you, Lois. And okay, so Senator Wilson, you're next on my panel here.
Thanks. I'm just curious. Hi, Keisha. Nice to see you.
Hi.
I'm just curious about the follow-up piece, because I am assuming if we do a follow-up with the first candidate with something that was a question in the second candidate, that it clearly would have to have something to do with what the first candidate had said. We can't interview a second person and then they said something and then we email a first person because we didn't have the same conversation in that. I mean, that just does not sound like it's the follow-up you're talking about. I just want to be really sure about that it's because of either what they didn't say or there was a hole, but it really has nothing to do with, I didn't hear that on the first one and I heard it on the second one. So I'm going to go back and ask the first candidate. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It really should be because there is a hole, not because you really just want them to expand on something. Honestly, that it's an unfortunate type of situation where they just didn't give their, I don't want to say their best, but they just didn't really sell themselves in that moment of opportunity. Even though you all saw they were sitting on maybe that crux of like really being like, and I'm the best person ever, right? And it's like you really wanted that. So really what that would step in and do is you're seeking that. I was also assuming, so I apologize, that with these follow-ups, the follow-up portion would be to candidates that have moved on to the second round. of interviewing. And so if they're in the second round, then that would be appropriate to either, again, tailor a question so that it can be asked to all the second round candidates, and or do this expansion in the moment for all second round candidates. It wouldn't be if somebody missed if they're not even making it to second round, then it's a different scenario. It's really figuring out a way to tailor these follow-up questions so that they can fit into your second round of interviewing.
Okay, Senator Warnick?
Thank you. And I think, you know, if we're going to do back and forth follow-up, it's going to take forever today because we're going to interview one, we're going to interview the next, we're going to deliberate, and then we're voting. So it's a little yeah. But
I absolutely agree.
And Bobby mentioned horses. So Rec Dent is here. His horse got him here eventually. So I don't know if you can see him or not, but I'm here, Bobby. Yeah. So I just wanted to let you know he's here.
Thank you. And yes, I completely agree. That's why it's suggested to just not do follow-ups.
Right.
Because it can really eat into the interview process.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing is we're going to go through the standardized questions with no follow-ups. Now, Keisha, we've already assigned the questions to people to ask from the subcommittee, the previous subcommittee. And I think it's probably okay that they just read the question because they're not going to be doing back and forth. It's just reading the question. But then my sense is from what you're saying, well, in this, I guess this is what I want consensus for the group. So if we do have, since it is second interview and we are expecting more from these candidates, and the board members, the full board did not get a chance to interview these two candidates previously, it would be acceptable to say for those of you who have not had a chance to interview the candidate, do you have a follow-up question like right at the end? And then if they do, like say, you know, Senator Wilson has a burning question that she feels like it's really important to know from both candidates. So then she asks the first candidate and the second candidate. Would that be acceptable?
I think so.
Or is that too confusing? Or should we just not have any follow-up questions?
So are you talking like a brand new question, Diane?
Right.
That has
like
nothing to do with the questions that are written on a.
Right. You guys, we missed some big area that you wanted to find out about that you think is super important. Is that?
I guess for me, I don't know, but for me, I would look at the app. I'm looking at the resume. I'm looking at their letter of interest, and I'm listening. And if I can't figure out from all of those things, I think we could get ourselves into asking a lot of other kinds of questions. I also trust implicitly the group that went through the initial group of folks that came before us. And so I trust the fact in the group that they've done our pre-work too. So, I mean, my hope would be there's not a lot of follow-up that we would, you know, need to do, but that's just my hope. I don't know.
Right.
Others might disagree.
Okay.
Well,
I think that sounds
Diane,
easier. Oh, Lois,
that's a
please.
perfect segue. Senator Wilson, you just stole my thunder. What I was going to say is that this group had delegated this responsibility.
Yes.
You know, we stepped forward, and I would hope that they would trust the two candidates that we're putting forward. I suggest that last question that we had that we were going to ask, that maybe Diane, that you could ask that question of both candidates, and we add that as another question if Ruth and Bobby are in agreement for both, and just simply use the verbiage that was shared with us by Keisha around longevity. And that will address that one, because that was really the only outstanding question that we had for candidates. So we can ask them that, and then for any board members, if for some reason, if we can all agree now that unless there is something that you urgently want to ask, that we just stick with. We have some really great questions. A lot of them were taken from our original ED questions, and then we added some other things in. I think you'll be pleased with them. And unless we totally miss the mark, I'm hoping that the board will trust the work that we put in over the last 6 weeks.
I second that emotion. Great, Lois.
Okay, all those in favor, aye.
Yeah.
Okay, I know, I think that sounds like the easiest, so I'm just going to scratch we're gonna ask the board for any additional questions. Now I have, and before I get to you, Ruth, or you just took your hand down, but I have one question for Keisha. So Keisha, we are asking the applicants, do they have any questions for us?
Yes,
Is there a
I
problem
was
with
just
that?
gonna
Or is
address that.
Is that okay?
Yep, that is absolutely okay. But please write them down. Just for a further deliberation, for that opportunity. If you know, a candidate, sometimes they wonder if that question was a little bit too forward or something like that, and you're gonna be like, I don't even remember what they asked. So just write it down, and that would be, I think, wonderful. That always is going to be something that is helpful, and it is that opportunity for the candidate really to fill in all of those gaps of questions where they can summarize, oh my gosh, I just sat here in this interview and I went round and round. I went all over the place. I shared my entire life and I forgot to land on this one point, right? And so that is, again, their opportunity to say, I don't have any questions for you, but I do want to, right, expand on or something like that. And that is allowing them to do that themselves. And that is a-okay because it wasn't prompted by you all as the interviewers.
Yeah. We did that at the first interview, just so you know. Yeah. I know we're getting close to the time here when our first one starts, but we did that, and they each had a question, and it was fine.
Yeah. And if you guys are sitting in that deliberation, and sometimes I was just on an extensive interview panel, and we all actually had what would have been a follow-up question, and we're all sitting there like, you had that question too? And that was our key of this candidate, unfortunately, just wasn't concise. They just didn't give us, I guess, if we all missed it and we were all seeking it, then that unfortunately was one of the areas where we kind of scored them down, because why are we all landed with this same question or this desire to know more in this particular area? So really rely also on your deliberation with each other and your debriefing. And again, I love that you all have mentioned many times that you just trust each other in this process. And I think that that's what you should do.
Thank you so much, Keisha. This was extremely helpful. I think exactly what we needed. And we really appreciate you spending your time with us this afternoon.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you for the invite. And so happy to be here. Invite us anytime. We can share.
And we hope Alice feels better soon.
Okay. Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. All right. And for the rest of you, you have about 3 minutes for a little mini. Moving to public meeting. Okay, we have now come back to public session after our executive session and candidate deliberation, and we are going to move forward with a vote on the executive director position. I will turn it over to Nicholas to do the vote call.
Thank you. So this will be the vote for if you would prefer Mark Hardy as a candidate. And it's a yay or a nay. So I'll start with Katie Byron.
Nay.
Senator Warnick.
Nay.
Justice Bobby Bridge.
Nay.
Representative Tom Dent.
Nay.
Senator Claire Wilson.
Nay.
Ruth Kagi.
You didn't unmute, Ruth.
I'm not on mute.
We hear you now.
Nay.
Thank you. Dr. Diane Levy,
Nay.
Lois Martin,
Nay.
Representative Tana Sen.
Nay.
All right, thank you. And just for clarity of the recording, Ben DeHaan, Sydney Forrester, and Danielle Johnson were marked as absent for the vote. All right, so now we'll do vote for if you would prefer Lisha as the preferred candidate. Katie Byron,
Yay.
Senator Judy Warnick,
Yay.
Justice Bobby Bridge,
Yay.
Representative Tom Dent,
Yay.
Senator Claire Wilson,
Yay.
Ruth Kagi,
Yay.
Dr. Diane Levy,
Yay.
Lois Martin,
Yay.
Representative Tana Sen,
Yay.
All right, that completes the votes for the preferred candidate. It is unanimous to Lisha. So with that, I don't know if we still need to do a final since there is no difference. So those aside.
Okay, so then we just need to have a motion then to hire Lisha as our top candidate, and then we'll need a second.
I
I
so
so
move.
move.
Okay,
Second.
great. Do we need to vote again or are we good? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Can I just
Any,
get, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, all those who are not in favor? Any abstentions? I remembered.
It's too late.
And can I
No.
just get clarity on who was the second?
Katie.
Katie, thank you.
All right, it looks like we don't have to go back into any further deliberation and that we're able to kind of move forward and that we've done this post haste. And I just want to say thank you so much for the board members who are here today, but also for the hiring subcommittee and all the work that you put in, because I know it was not a simple process, and to try to kind of coordinate folks that are like an amoeba, I know is a difficult thing. So the time and the attention that you put and the initial interviews, I know were really help us all in today's opportunity to have two great candidates come before us and be able to make that kind of a choice. And I'm also really appreciative of our kind of collective agreement and also on our conversations. And that is a huge thing when we come together as a community to just make sure that we're doing the best we can do for children and families across the state of Washington. So the next steps in the process are that Nicholas, I do believe, is going to do the presentation of our candidate of choice to Human Resources. And then there are a number of things that happen behind the scenes there that'll take place, and that he will keep us abreast and informed of kind of what, not only how the process is going, but what's happening, I think, within the process. So we have an idea of when we can expect to have a new executive director actually seated, if you will, and moving us forward. But until then, Nicholas is steering our ship, and a deepest appreciation to you as well for keeping us, moving forward and really also supporting the subcommittee and all of their hiring work. And I know there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that we know nothing about, and that's the best part about it. When you know nothing about it, that means something's working. So, but there's a lot I know of back steps that we are not part of, and really deepest appreciation for the work you've been doing and in so many different ways. So just wondering if there is anything else for the good of the order, and I'm not sure if that's hands up or if there's a clap, but I'm gonna,
It's
oh,
hands.
It's hands up.
all
it's
righty,
hands
so
up.
I'm gonna pass this over. I see Rep. Kegi. So Ruth,
Well, I also want to thank Nicholas, who's done a fabulous job, and Diane, who's really led this whole process. But I know we have to turn in our rating sheets, and I'm wondering if we can mail our written rating sheets to you, or if we need to type into the system, or I
Nope, you
really
can,
would like to just be able to mail you
take
my
a picture
sheets.
of it, Ruth. Take a picture of it. That's what I've been doing with my, seriously, with my interviews with other agency positions. I've just taken a photo and sent it via email to, and Nicholas, you may kill me for this one, but that's what I'm doing is I'm gonna send you mine via email and just take a snapshot of it. So I don't have to redo anything because
I am,
that's,
I
I
am
scanned it
easy
last
and I'll
time.
take it any way you want to send it to me.
I
Mail,
scanned it
picture.
last time. I think, I don't know whether it's readable, but I guess that's another issue.
yeah.
But my hand's up because I'm sorry, Ruth, did you get it? What you wanted?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All of us, well, the four of us on the committee, had, I'm almost out of juice. I'm going to walk over and plug you in. Had a concern that we move expeditiously once we got in it, and we noted how strong these candidates were. And so I hope that we don't get in the HR loop, which is something, similar to an abyss. So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, are reference checks made? And is that something that's happening now? And then thirdly, who makes the offer? Who makes the offer?
So the reference checks are going to be done most likely this week.
Okay.
It will be done, and then HR will handle the offer. So
Okay.
so I'll be working with HR. I've had basically 2 phone calls a week with our HR person. She's incredibly responsive on top of things. I'm pretty confident that will move well. And so I'll be in touch with her tomorrow and we will begin that process. And she'll take over on references as well, and then reaching out for offering.
Super. Thanks so much.
Looks like Senator Warnick.
Yeah, my question is, since a couple of us were pretty close in our evaluations, will there be a follow-up with Mark? And just letting you know that some of this was very close.
Yes. I'll have to do the phone call, basically,
Yeah.
the thank you, but we went another direction, and I took notes of what you all said about each candidate, so I'll have a little thing to craft for Mark about how close it was, and and if he does ask, what could he improve on, I have a couple of things. So
Great.
I will be handling that phone call.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Nicholas. Once again.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And Nicholas, just a couple of things to kind of put in your the board's mind is that I suspect Nicholas will give us a clear start date once we know that the candidate is accepted and when they're starting. And then the next thing to just kind of ponder is we had decided before this whole process that the next piece of business would be to get together a board retreat. So I'm thinking maybe sometime in the next couple of weeks, we should get some surveys circulated so we can start saving some dates. We were looking at maybe October as an option. So, okay. So kind of other next steps.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. I think we're done.
Thank you all. Happy
Hold
4th
on,
of July.
Lois
One
has,
Yeah, have a
second
great-
before we go.
Thank you.
Thank
Wait,
you.
hold on,
Oh.
Bobby. You need to hear this too. Well, you're sending yours in, but for those of us, was typing my notes. Nicholas, do you want me to send it as a PDF or as a spreadsheet?
Just send it as a spreadsheet.
Okay, and then I know hopefully this will not happen, but what is our contingency? Let's say Elisha, for whatever reason, decides no. Do we then start over again, or do we then just offer the position to Mark? Because we still have more steps to go through. We have to, HR still has to check references. And so I'm just wondering, like, what's our contingency plan?
Well, and if we should hold off on notifying
I'm telling Mark,
Mark.
yeah, that's
until
what I would think.
Elisha accepts the position.
I agree.
Yeah,
Yep,
I have
That's
not.
the-
checked on
we're
it.
so close. We all agree that either could do the job. So should we, as the old folks say, cut off
Good
our
point.
nose to spite our faces?
no. I mean, we just wait to talk to Mark. I think that makes sense,
Well,
absolutely.
I'm sure it's not that easy. We probably have to come back together and have another vote. But
Well, we would, but
Yeah.
we don't, the major thing, I think, that
Yeah.
which Lois's comments make is that he doesn't make a call to Mark tonight.
yeah,
No, I won't make I won't make a
Definitely.
call to Mark until Lisha has confirmed the offer.
Right,
Okay.
great.
And if at any point Lisha does decide to not accept the offer, that will be the first thing I do following that notification will be notifying the full board if that were to happen so that we could get back together.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That was it,
thank
Diane.
you all. Oh, thank you all. Have a great holiday.
Thank you. all.
You too.
We'll see you
Happy
soon.
4th.
Bye.
Can't
Bye.
believe we
Bye.
got it done.